I think I might hold the unofficial world record for fixing the most HOA violations in a single afternoon, 1:39 a.m., to be exact, all wiped out in one glorious, watery sweep. It wasn't some petty revenge plot or anything dramatic like that. Nah, it was just me, standing up for what my family's held on to for generations, using nothing but gravity and a little old dam my great-great-grandpa built back in the day. But let me back up, 'cause this story's got roots deeper than those Ozark Hills where it all went down, and by the end, you'll see how a quiet hydrological engineer like me turned the tables on a bunch of entitled folks who thought they could redraw lines on a map and call it their own. It all started with my family's land, this sprawling 2,000-acre spread in the heart of the Missouri Ozarks that my great-great-grandfather, Elijah Hawthorne, snapped up in the 1920s for pennies on the dollar after the timber boom fizzled out. Elijah was a sharp cookie, a civil engineer who'd cut his teeth on big projects out west, and he saw potential in those rugged valleys flood-prone as heck during the rainy seasons, but perfect for taming with some ingenuity. So he got to work, hauling local limestone and granite to build this massive, old-school dam, the kind with those huge, interlocking stones that looked like they were stacked by giants. By the time he was done, he'd created Hawthorne Lake, a 700-acre beauty that not only kept the floods at bay, but could have powered a small town if he'd hooked up the hydro gear he dreamed about in his journals. For 5 generations, we've kept that dam humming through the Hawthorne. Trust me, folks maintained the sluice gates, dredged the silt, and held onto the riparian rights like they were sacred. Me? I grew up in the old stone lodge overlooking the water, fishing off the dock as a kid, learning the lake's moods like it was a living thing. But life throws curveballs. In the 70s, estate taxes hit hard, and we had to sell off chunks of the land to keep the core intact: the dam, the lake bed, and about 500 acres around it. Still, it was ours, quiet and wild, until the vultures circled. That changed about 3 years ago when this slick developer, Summit Residences, swooped in and bought up the adjacent parcels we'd let go decades back. They turned it into Eagle's Nest Estates, this gated paradise for the well-heeled crowd. Think McMansions with fake stone facades, infinity pools, and views straight out onto my lake, which they started treating like their personal playground. Leading the charge was Marjorie Whitaker, or Marge, as everyone called her, the HOA president with a clipboard in one hand and a sense of entitlement in the other. Marge wasn't some cartoon villain. She was a retired real estate agent who'd clawed her way up in a man's world, and now she saw Eagle's Nest as her kingdom, protecting property values at all costs, even if it meant stepping on toes. At first, it was subtle stuff, like newsletters in my mailbox demanding I upgrade my weathered dock to match their aesthetic guidelines, or emails about how my unauthorized boat launch was an eyesore. I'd reply politely, attaching surveys and deeds showing the clear boundaries. Our land ran right up to the water's edge, and the lake was private property. But Marge? She took it personal, like I was some hillbilly holdout defying progress. Deep down, I think it burned her that a guy like me, with my hydrology degree and hands-on know-how, wasn't impressed by her power play. She underestimated me, saw me as just another relic from the old days, while jealousy simmered over how my family's legacy loomed over their shiny new community. Things escalated when the HOA announced their grand recreation enhancement plan: a private beach, a fancy pier, even picnic pavilions right on what they claimed was communal shoreline. I fired off a cease and desist with ironclad surveys from the county, but they hit back with their own updated map, one that magically shifted the lines to gobble up 50 acres of my lakefront. Turns out, their surveyor was some unlicensed hack Marge's nephew knew, and they'd tweaked the boundaries just enough to make it look legit: subtle alterations to elevation markers, ignoring historical deeds. It wasn't random. Marge had a grudge, whispering to neighbors about how my neglected land was dragging down values, and the developer smelled profit in waterfront lots. I dug in, compiling a dossier of evidence-old plats, GPS data, even Elijah's original blueprints, and reported the fraud to the authorities, but the HOA blew it off, betting they could build fast and force a settlement. Bulldozers rolled in at dawn one day, crossing my fence line, ripping up ancient oaks that had shaded my grandpa's picnics. I called the sheriff, heart pounding, but he shrugged it off as a civil matter. Take it to court, son. That lit a fire in me. This wasn't just land. It was my heritage, the place where I'd scattered my parents' ashes, and now these outsiders were carving it up like it meant nothing. The real gut punch came with Phase 2. They slapped up 139 luxury cabins along the shore, prefab monstrosities marketed as exclusive retreats, all while our court date loomed. Marge's motive? Pure power: consolidate control, boost dues, and erase any reminder that their paradise was built on borrowed ground. But me? I felt that inner storm building, the kind where you question if fighting fair even works anymore. I wasn't about to roll over, though not with Elijah's spirit whispering through those archives I'd pored over in the lodge's dusty attic. His journals revealed a gem, a 7-foot buffer zone around the lake, the natural high water mark at 1,852 feet elevation versus the 1,845 we usually maintained for safety. Those cabins, smack in the floodplain, built on what was technically lake bed during peak times. It hit me like a thunderclap. This wasn't destruction, it was restoration, using the very forces my ancestor harnessed. I prepped quietly, inspecting the dam's manual gates, rusty but solid, testing them under cover of night. Drones buzzed overhead for photos. Time-lapse cams captured every violation, and I looped in environmental folks about the illegal grading messing with wetlands reports that went ignored, of course. My lawyer, an old family friend named Tom who'd handled the trust for years, drafted a final notice, 48 hours to evacuate for routine maintenance. That had raised the water to its legal high mark. We sent it certified, posted signs, even emailed Marge directly. Her response? Crickets, probably laughing it off as a bluff from the crazy lake guy. Inside, I wrestled with I crossing a line here, playing God with the water? But nah, this was justice, rooted in deeds and nature's own rules, not vengeance. The clock ticked down, and as the deadline passed, I notified the sheriff and Tom, heart steady now, ready to let gravity do the talking. That afternoon, with the sun dipping low over the Ozarks, I hiked down to the dam creeks feeding in strong after recent rains and cranked those sluice gates shut, one by one, the metal groaning like an old friend waking up. Water started backing up slow at first, inches per hour, creeping up the banks like a patient tide. From the lodge porch, binoculars in hand, I watched it unfold like a slow-motion movie, yards turning to mud, then water lapping at cabin foundations, folks scrambling with buckets and sandbags. Panic set in, construction crews yelling, abandoning tools that bobbed away on the rising swell. By mid-afternoon, the lowest cabins were knee-deep, electrical panels shorting with pops and sparks, sending acrid smoke curling up. That's when Marge showed up in her SUV, screeching to a halt, face twisted in fury as she stormed toward me across the soggy grass. "What the hell are you doing, you maniac?" she spat, jabbing a finger at the flooding scene. "This is sabotage. I'll have you arrested." I stayed calm, handing her the notice copy, but inside, that mix of triumph and pity bubbled uppity for how blind ambition had led her here. The deputy arrived soon after, lights flashing, and I laid it all out. Deeds, warnings, the dam's rights. He flipped through the docs, nodding slow. "Looks legal to me. My amethyst is his property, his water. Civil court'll sort the rest." Marge's rage melted into horror as another cabin groaned, its porch buckling under the wavish, bet everything on bullying her way through, and now her empire was dissolving. You planned this," she whispered, voice cracking, but I just shrugged. "Nature doesn't care about your surveys, Marge. Neither do I. We held the water high for a month, long enough for mold to bloom like ugly flowers inside those cabins, silt to bury floors, and foundations to crack beyond salvage. The fallout was epic. Insurance companies laughed off claims, citing gross negligence. Lawsuits flew against the HOA, Summit, even that shady surveyor. Marge got ousted in a special meeting. Turns out, residents weren't thrilled about dues skyrocketing to cover the mess, and the whole outfit went bankrupt, their assets auctioned off. The land, snapped up by a conservation group at a steal, preserving it as wilderness. I lowered the levels gradually, hired local crews to demo the wreckage funded by scrap metal sales, and a fat court judgment in my favor. Within 2 years, the shoreline healed, native willows and cattails reclaiming the banks, fish jumping like nothing happened. Looking back, I ain't no hero or villain. I was just a guy defending what 5 generations built, teaching folks that boundaries matter, and sometimes nature enforces them better than any judge. But here's where it gets tricky: was I right to flood him out? Or should I have waited for the slow grind of court? Did Marge deserve that downfall, driven by her own insecurities? Or was she just another cog in a system that rewards the bold? And what about those community clashes, HOAs protecting values or overreaching tyrants? I'd love to hear your take down in the comments. Was this sweet justice or a step too far? Share your own HOA horror stories, or tell me if you've ever had to fight for your slice of home. Hit that like button if it resonated. Subscribe for more real-life tales from the edge, and let's keep the conversation going. After all, stories like this remind us we're all just trying to hold our ground.